Hello and welcome back to T1D Academy. I'm Harold, and Liam and I truly appreciate you spending time with us as always as we discuss another important topic around type 1 diabetes management. Today we're going to talk about something that most people living with type 1 diabetes will experience at some point, especially early on after diagnosis, and it can be confusing. You might start noticing blood sugar numbers rising at certain times of the night, even when everything else seems to be going right. And it's not always clear why. What we're talking about here is something known as the dawn phenomenon. This is one of those things where you can be doing everything right, you go to bed in range, there's no late night snacks, insulin seems dialed in correctly, and then you wake up, look at your numbers, and think, what in the world just happened? If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. The dawn phenomenon is a natural biological process that happens in the early morning hours, typically somewhere between around 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. During this time, the body starts releasing certain hormones to help prepare you to wake up and to get moving around for the day. These hormones include things like cortisol, growth hormone, and others that essentially signal your body that it's time to get ready. Part of what those hormones do is tell the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream. In someone without diabetes, the body automatically responds by releasing just the right amount of insulin to keep blood sugars fairly stable, usually extremely well flatlined for people without type 1 diabetes. And that system is constantly working in the background in perfect harmony. But with type 1 diabetes, that automatic insulin response is not there. So what ends up happening is you still get that glucose release from the liver, but without the matching insulin to balance it out. And that's why you'll often see blood sugar start rising in those early morning hours, even if nothing else has changed, even if throughout the entire night you had a relatively flat line. Between 3 and 7 or 8 o'clock a.m. in those hours, typically, the body is beginning to release those hormones and wake up, and you will more than likely notice that increase in blood glucose levels. We saw it very early with Liam. Until we were able to dial in his basal insulin and his ISF rates to account for this glucose release occurring each morning, we saw it for at least 2 or 3 months until we figured out and dialed it in correctly. There were plenty of nights where Liam went to bed in great range, everything looked perfect, but like clockwork, somewhere between 4 a.m. we would start to see a steady climb again in his BG levels. And if you do nothing about it, those numbers can continue to rise, sometimes even into the 200s, 300s, and even higher into the dangerous territory. And it would carry right through until he woke up if we didn't account for it. Over time, I spent a lot of time learning, reading books, and working with the helpful members of the FUD Diabetes Forum community that I co-founded with other individuals in 2018. That's how we started to really understand what was going on and adjust our settings to account for this phenomenon. For Liam specifically, we had to take 2 separate actions. First, we had to increase his basal insulin during those early morning hours to offset that glucose release that was happening. And second, we had to lower his insulin sensitivity factor, or his correction factor, so that his loop system would open up the possibility of delivering additional insulin if he was heading high or already high. Meaning, it took a little more insulin to break those numbers down during that window, and Liam was a little less insulin sensitive compared to the other times of the day. And this is really where things start to come together. Understanding how basal rates and insulin sensitivity work together, especially during times like this, is a huge part of preventing those roller coaster swings in blood sugar and getting as close to a flat line as possible, given your situation and other variables like hormones, stress, and puberty. Now, a topic that sometimes comes up in this conversation is something called the Somogyi Effect. And before we go too far into that, I do want to mention something important. And I'll actually give a quick thank you here to Eric from the FUD Diabetes Forum community for even bringing this topic up to me and others way back in 2018, because it led to some really good discussions and a deeper understanding. The Somogyi Rebound Effect is something that dates back to the findings of Dr. Michael Somogyi in the early 1930s. It's not really considered a strongly proven phenomenon today, and is somewhat refuted in modern diabetes management. So in most cases, a low overnight blood glucose level is not what's causing those high blood sugars in the morning. The Somogyi effect is described as blood sugars dropping low during the night and then the body rebounding by releasing glucose, causing a high in the morning. So in that case, the high would be a response to a low that happened earlier. With the dawn phenomenon, there is no low beforehand. Blood sugar is stable and then it rises because of those early morning hormone releases and that early morning liver glucose dump into the bloodstream. And this is where tools like continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs, become incredibly helpful, because they let you actually see what's happening overnight instead of guessing. In those early days after Liam was diagnosed, before we had that kind of visibility, I spent probably the first 3 months as a complete walking zombie. I wasn't sleeping well, not in any real sense of the word. I was so worried about something happening to him, like I talked about in one of the very first videos that I made on this channel, that I was sticking him roughly every 30 minutes throughout the night just to make sure he was okay, just to make sure he was sleeping and not in trouble. So when I say tools like CGMs are helpful, I mean that in a very real, very personal way. They don't just give you data, they give you peace of mind. And they let you actually see what's happening without having to guess or constantly interrupt sleep. But as a caveat, I will add this. While I absolutely love CGMs, and I believe that's the best technology that we have for Liam, I've learned over the years to use them more for seeing trends in data more than the individual data points themselves. Because the reality is, CGMs are not always perfectly accurate. Many times they are not accurate. There have been plenty of times, especially more recently, where they've shown highs or lows when he actually wasn't high or low. But what they do really well is show you direction and trajectory, or speed. Whether things are steady and slowly moving, or double arrows up or down, meaning moving very fast in one direction or another. And that information is incredibly valuable when you're making treatment decisions. If you look at the data and see a steady rise starting in those early morning hours, that's much more consistent with dawn phenomenon. And if you're going along steady, let's say 3 a.m., and you suddenly see a sharp drop in your CGM, more often than not, that could be something called a compression low, which we'll cover in a future video. That's where pressure on a sensor can cause a false low reading. And that's because you're putting pressure on it, and that sensor is faced down into the mattress, so it's got pressure, which causes that sensor interruption. So again, this is where understanding trends really matters, and having technology that enables you to see it early and correct it is critical. Now let's talk about what you can actually do about it, because this is where things become manageable. If you're using an insulin pump, this is one of the situations where pump therapy really shines. You can program higher basal rates during specific time windows, like for instance 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., and ISF rates to better match what your body is doing. Some automated insulin delivery systems will even start adjusting on their own based on trends, which can help smooth out this quite a bit. If you're using multiple daily injections, or MDI, it can be a little more challenging, but still manageable. Sometimes it comes down to adjusting the timing or the type of basal insulin, or working with your care team to fine-tune dosing so that coverage is stronger during those early morning hours. In some cases, people also look at things like a small correction dose when waking up, or adjusting breakfast timing and insulin to account for that elevated starting point. There's no one-size-fits-all answer here, and that's something I want to really be clear about. What worked for Liam might not be exactly what works for anyone else. But the key is understanding what's happening so you can make informed decisions and adjustments instead of just constantly reacting to the highs and the lows. This is one of those moments where understanding replaces frustration. And once you understand it, you can begin taking control of it. Now, in our next video, we're going to start talking about something that's extremely important to understand in type 1 diabetes management. And that's another topic that I've referred to earlier, known as Diabetic Ketoacidosis. And I love saying that word, or DKA. This is a serious condition that can develop when the body does not have enough insulin. and it's something every person living with type 1 diabetes or caring for someone with type 1 diabetes should understand early on, and it's a skill that you learn in the hospital. Before wrapping up, and as a disclaimer, the content on the T1D Academy YouTube channel is for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as medical advice. I am neither a doctor nor a healthcare professional. Please consult with a qualified healthcare professional for medical guidance specific to your situation. Until the next video, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and remember, you've got this. And as always, Liam, 143AI+1.